Let's talk about all of the books on my physical TBR. Hi, I'm Sarah, and welcome to my first ever YouTube video. It's fairly obvious and goes without saying that I have a lot of books on my physical TBR. So today we're going to talk about the books that I have on my physical TBR, why they're on my physical TBR, and basically what they're about, because I have no idea where to start in reading them. So I'm thinking it's probably best to start off with some of the books that have been on my physical TBR the longest. And for the absolute longest book on my physical TBR is The Stardust Thief. This book has been on my physical TBR since I got it from Book of the Month in June of 2022. This means that this book has been on my physical TBR for exactly 2 years. Now I know that's not the longest a book has ever been on someone's physical TBR. However, I have made it a personal goal to limit and lower my physical TBR because I'm constantly taking in books, both as part of a consumer reviewer standpoint and also from the fact that I work at my local indie bookstore. But The Stardust Thief is a fantasy about a character who hunts and sells illegal magic along with the help of a sidekick type character, who is a magical being creature. And that's pretty much all I know. But apparently, it's also been considered kind of a romantasy because there's tension between the main character and this sultan's son type person. So there is a lot of layers to it, and I really want to read it. Again, all of the books on my physical TBR I genuinely can't wait to read. But this is one I haven't heard a lot about, and so I'm unsure about diving in, especially because it did only come out 2 years ago, and it is the first book in a trilogy. Next up in the contest of books that have been on my physical TBR the longest is the first 3 books in the Throne of Glass series. Obviously, there is a lot of kind of controversy around Sarah J. Maas. I really loved A Court of Thorns and Roses when I read it. I really am excited to read these, but I bought them last summer. I only bought the first 3, and that has become a big regret of mine, because I know I'm going to read the whole series. Everything I'm told about it, I'm I'm going to love this series. But I'm scared to read the first 3 until I have a much smaller physical TBR, because I want to just roll straight into the rest of the series and not have anything else on my plate. Obviously, there's a lot out there about the Throne of Glass series and what it's about. I've been told that the less you know going into it, the better. Spoiler territory, I will have something up on the screen so you can mute me while I talk about this, but I have had several things spoiled from me for the Throne of Glass series. I know who ends up with who as a basic. I know that Aelin and Selena, however you say her name, are the same person. And a few other things who dies and who lives and that kind of thing, which is a big reason I'm not sure I'm ever going to read the prequel that she wrote that's a bunch of short stories, because I know that Sam Cortland dies, and that just does not, I know everything that happens in that book, and so in my mind it just doesn't feel worth it to read that book, because I know every detail of what happens in it. If you think that should change, please let me know in the comments. But yeah, I basically have no idea when I'm going to read these. Yeah. I just know very little about the series plot-wise and know a lot of the little details. So I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but it does sound really intriguing to me. And then for the next longest book on my physical TBR, we have The Hurricane Wars. I got this for Christmas, begged for it for Christmas, actually would be a more apt statement. I am so excited to read this. I am a huge fan of fantasy, have been since I was a small child. Like, my favorite series from childhood are Percy Jackson and Kingdom Keepers and Fablehaven, and like literally anything with fantastical elements in it. Put it in front of me, I was devouring that. So now that I'm like adult and actually read romance as well, the idea of a romantasy that combines those two elements of these two genres that I really love is fantastic. I don't know if this is going to be a trilogy. I know this is not the only book. I've already seen the cover reveal for book 2. I've heard it ends on a terrible cliffhanger. I don't know how true that is. I don't remember where I heard that, but I know that I did. So, like, I want to read it very desperately. I just am at this point where I'm like, do I wait until I know for a fact that I can get my hands on either an advanced copy of book 2, or like, do I start it a week before book 2 comes out so I can just roll straight into it and not have to deal with a cliffhanger? But then I'm at this point where if book 2 ends on a cliffhanger, I have to deal with that. So there are multiple levels to that, but yeah, I got this for Christmas, so that is my third longest book on my physical TBR. I'm counting Throne of Glass as one book. I know it's 3, but I'm counting it as one for the purpose of this video on my Goodreads TBR, physical TBR list. It counts as 3, but for now it counts as 1. Next up, all of these books were acquired at the same time, so I'm just going to kind of go through them bit by bit. I just finished a study abroad semester in Greece, and I ended my study abroad semester by backpacking for 18 days, and that particular trip was ended with 2 days in London. Don't need to hear the criticism on how that's not enough time in London. I've heard it from so many people, and I know it myself. But when I was in London, I decided that because books are so cheap in the UK, and also because I prefer the UK covers of certain books, or at least the sizing of UK books, I bought myself some books that I'd already read and just bought the UK covers of. But these are the UK books that I bought that I have not yet read in any capacity. So at first we have a book that I've wanted to read for a very long time, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. This is a much better size than the paperback in the US. If you live in the US, you know what I'm talking about. The paperback is the dimensions of like a hardcover. It is huge. It is massive, and there is no reason for it. It is just genuinely one of the most frustrating things in the world. It's not a book that you can comfortably hold and read, if that makes sense. This fits in one hand. It's perfect. It's comfortable. It's easy breezy. I was a huge fan of The Secret History. I read it because Book Talk was talking about it, and I am a huge fan of anything dark academia. Huge fan of any mysteries, and so The Secret History just sounded like something I would really enjoy, and I devoured it. And obviously, like, as a huge fan of Secret History and as a huge fan of Donna Tartt's writing as a whole, I fully believe that The Secret History deserved to win the Pulitzer it was up for. Obviously it didn't, but it was a nominee. The Goldfinch is Donna Tartt's book that did win a Pulitzer, and so I feel like because I loved her book and the writing in it that didn't win this award, I feel like I kind of have to read the one that won an award. The premise is like a little less intriguing to me than The Secret History, but it also like does sound compelling. So I'm really excited to dive into this one, but I haven't heard anybody talk about The Goldfinch, really. I know that it was turned into a movie, because I got ads for the movie, and then that's when I was like, oh, I guess Donna Tartt wrote a book that won a Pulitzer. So yeah, that's like a big one that I want to read. at some point, obviously. And it needs to be, I know myself, and it needs to be in the summertime, because I will not be able to read a book this dense with that small of print and this, like, beautifully written if I can't focus on it, which means it cannot be during my school year. So that's kind of where we're at with that one. But yeah. And then the next book that I bought while I was abroad was Kiss of Deception, because I loved Dance of Thieves. Like, I do not think I can properly convey how much I loved Dance of Thieves. I didn't love the sequel. That was definitely like a 3-star read for me, but Dance of Thieves was definitely a 5. Like, I easily made that a 5. And so I really want to read Kiss of Deception. Also, this cover is just gorgeous, so even if I hate the book, it's so pretty. But this one is basically about this girl who is supposed to have this super awesome special gift, and is betrothed to this prince that she's never met, and she doesn't want to marry him. So on the morning of her wedding, she takes off and basically, like, leaves her husband at the altar. She starts living in this, like, tiny little village, and then meets these, like, 2 mysterious, handsome strangers, it says. One of them is the prince she's supposed to marry. The other is an assassin who's, like, supposed to kill her. So obviously lots of tension, lots of badass female main character type vibes. It's YA fantasy, and I honestly think YA fantasy is just really underrated as a genre, but also it is kind of more romantasy. Like, Mary E. Pearson kind of premiered romantasy as a genre with Dance of Thieves, and Kiss of Deception actually came before Dance of Thieves. So these books genuinely, like, were the start of romantasy as a genre, before it kind of became overplayed. And I feel like nowadays a lot of people are really capitalizing on tropes in romantasy, so to get to kind of go back to one of those books that inspired that also sounds really interesting. If I'm not mistaken, this is part of a trilogy. I know there are other books, I just don't know how many. I want to say it's a trilogy. Yeah, it's a trilogy. 3 books. So I will have 2 other books to read after this, but I did break up Dance of Thieves in the sequel, and that wasn't, like, devastating because there wasn't a massive cliffhanger. I don't know if this will be the same way, because I don't know if Dance of Thieves was originally intended to be a duology, or if it was only intended to be a standalone and then got a sequel. I know I was supposed to read this before Dance of Thieves. I didn't know that. I had no problem with Dance of Thieves. But yeah, that's where I'm at with that. Sounds really good. I'm really into it. Listen, I know this is such a big book for people on Book Talk. It's a big for people on BookTube, Book Talk, Bookstagram. Like, it is literally every book platform. It's there. So, I mean, there's a lot of room. I like it because, again, the paperback size and proportions of this are like the paperback size and proportions with the Goldfinch. It is ridiculous. It's too tall, it's too wide, it's not something you can comfortably hold. This is super comfortable, easy to hold, love it. It's the UK cover. And it's the same cover, but it's smaller in the way that I want it to be. So, there's that. And then the last book I bought while abroad is literally the exact same cover and the exact same size. I just wanted it and thought I was going to read it on the plane, and then I didn't. Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. I have heard about her books on every platform. I actually discovered her books from Instagram, I believe. And again, I work at an indie bookstore, so a lot of my coworkers will recommend me books, and a lot of them read romance. And I have repeatedly been told that because I like slow burn, I need to read Mariana Zapata. But I've also heard that the slow burn isn't always executed well. They're just like dumb, so there's no reason for it to be slow, which doesn't typically bother me as much as one might assume. But I don't know. Basically, this is the main character is the assistant and housekeeper and like basically does all this taking care stuff of this guy who is a football player, and she quits because she's like, I'm done dealing with him, and also I don't want to be an assistant forever. And he shows up at her door basically begging her to come back. He's like, I can't live without you, I need you to manage all my stuff. And then they basically like have to, like, I don't know, it's very like, it's very vague. It's a very, very vague description on the back. So I don't know entirely what happens in this book in terms of premise. I know it's really slow. I know it's bigger than a romance book has any right to be. So I'm hoping there's some subplot in there. I don't know. It's kind of where I'm at this point. Don't really know why I bought this book. I was planning to read it on my 9-hour flight, and then I just, like, got tired. So I did not, in fact, read this book. I feel like I really would have enjoyed it had I devoured it on that 9-hour flight. At this point, I'm like, when am I going to read this? Maybe, I don't know. I have a long trip coming up. I have to do a long drive. Maybe I'll read it in the car. But don't really know if I'm going to end up committing to finishing this book. I'm not a huge DNF person, but if I hate it halfway through, I will not finish it. And I'm kind of worried because I thought it was going to be really good, and then I kind of heard really mixed reviews. So please let me know in the comments whether I'm going to love it or hate it. I would love some advice. Obviously, I work at an indie bookstore, so my first shift back, I bought some books. I've already read several of the ones that I bought. This was back in April, so a lot of these books are recently acquired. Yeah. So I have the 3rd, 4th, and 5th book in the off-campus series. I loved The Deal. I thought The Mistake was just okay. I have heard that The Score and The Goal are better than The Mistake, and obviously The Legacy is like basically an extended epilogue for all of them, which is why it's so much shorter. I do have the sprayed edge editions. I have the cartoony covers. I always knew I was going to buy these books, but I was waiting for a cover that was not half-naked people. So that is that. Obviously, rom-coms, hockey romance. I'll get to it eventually. It's kind of where I'm at. But they're fun. Like, I like to stick rom-coms where I exactly know what I'm getting, especially if I've already read from that author, as something to just break up when I'm reading other stuff, or to like easily breeze through when I feel myself getting into a reading slump. That's kind of where I go. Yeah. Next up is our largest category by far, as you can probably tell. Holy cow. No books were injured in the making of this video, I promise. Largest category by far, which you can't see this. Largest category by far, is books that I was given as part of an event that my job hosted, where representatives from different publishers could come and speak to us about upcoming releases, books that had just released, things like that, and were giving us and sending us copies for review in exchange. I went a little wild. This event happened a little over a month ago, not too long ago, but long enough ago that it was like a time I usually wouldn't have gotten to attend, which was really cool because my semester ended early. So let's talk about some of those books. Right off the bat, we've got 2 really good YA books. I grabbed the wrong one. We've got a really good YA book called Snow Globe. I fully picked this up and wanted it because it sounded to me like this book that I read in the 8th grade, which I'm pretty sure is a very obscure book, so call me out on it if it isn't. But it's called The Other Side of the Island, and it's about these people who live inside this bubble. And everyone in the world lives inside these little bubbles things where the government can control the weather. And outside, everything is just insane. They get all this footage of these insane storms, and it's terrible to live there, and yada, yada, yada. But they break out to the other side of this island that they live on and discover that that is not the case, that they have been fed lies by their government, and that these bubbles are actually making the climate worse. So I thought it would be really cool to read this book where the climate actually is terrible, but the only people who get to live in that kind of bubble are celebrities who their lives literally become a TV show for everybody who has a terrible, terrible life. And this girl who's working in the factory with her little brother and her grandmother, who no longer recognizes her because she has dementia, she just really does not have a great life. She sees her mother only when she's working at the factory, and she finds out that this girl who looks exactly like her on the television, who lives inside of this like snow globe type environment, who is super, super famous, dies. She's killed. And rather than get rid of the character, the government comes to her and is like, hey, we want you to pretend to be her. You're going to take over her whole life, and you're going to come live in Snow Globe. And so she accepts the like challenge for that. And that's kind of where the book goes. It's really, really cool. This book was originally written in Korean. So this is the English translation. It came out in February of this year, so I still have an advance copy because that's what they were giving out for free. But yeah, it came out in February, and I genuinely am like so excited to read this. It's just a matter of time. I will get to it. I will love it. I know I will. But I am kind of in this place where I'm like, when am I gonna get to it? So it happens. The other YA book that I have that I got from this event is called Blood at the Root. It came out in May of this year. I actually had not heard about this at all when I picked it up. I have since heard a lot about it. I have a friend who read the audiobook and adored it. I've seen it in some booktube videos. It genuinely is something that just sounds really, really cool. And is one of those recommendations you give for like real representation of it, like an actual teenager. Like it feels like reading a teenager's mind. So basically this kid, his mom vanished. Like she didn't die, she just vanished, when he was 7 years old, and now he's 17, and he's like ready to start over. He's been taking care of his foster brother since he was like really young. He has to like do something to protect them. And then he ends up connecting with his long-lost grandmother, who's, quote, a legendary conjurer with ties to a hidden magical university that his mother attended. So basically he ends up going to this university, which is in Louisiana, if I am not mistaken, which is kind of amazing. As someone from the South, we don't get a lot of representation here, in terms of where characters live. So that's really cool. But he goes to this magical university and has to kind of like learn to build his powers, I guess. So it genuinely sounds like the coolest urban portal fantasy type situation. I really can't wait to read it. It really, really sounds great. And I've heard that the characters are really well written, which is not always the case for YA. Which makes me extra excited to read this. Next we have a lot of books, some of them released, some of them not, and just all books still from this event, and we're moving into the adult instead of YA. but we have The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. He wrote The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This book, I tragically believe, should have been released several months later or several months earlier than it was, for one very specific reason. It released The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, not this one in my hand. The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle released the same month as The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So a lot of people thought they were the same book, and they are not, in fact, the same book. Actually, in the UK, this was originally called The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, that book was. But they changed it. And genuinely, like, it's such a good mystery, but it was very overshadowed by The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because people who read that book are not looking for a mystery, or people who are looking for that book are not looking for a mystery. And this was a very clear-cut mystery with a little bit of a fantasy element. This is by the same author, and basically they have to solve this murder in order to save the world. They say, from the best-selling author of the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle and The Devil in the Dark Water comes an inventive, high-concept murder mystery. It's an ingenious puzzle, an extraordinary backdrop, and audacious solution. So that, it just sounds really good to me. It came out in May, already out. It's great. It's fantastic. I loved his first book. I've, like, skimmed the first 2 chapters of this book, and it already sounds really good. So I just can't wait to dive into this one and talk about it, because I know I'm really going to like it. Next, we have the Titanic Survivors Book Club. And basically, a bunch of people who were supposed to be on the Titanic but didn't end up boarding get together to kind of deal with their survivor's guilt. They get together to deal with their survivor's guilt, and they don't really know how to handle it. So what they do is they start reading these books, and they start a book club. Who would have guessed that? They start a book club. And basically it says, like, it starts out following this one character who was supposed to curate the library on the Titanic, but the day it set sail, he was left on the dock by accident. After the ship sinking, Yorick takes this twist of fate as a sign to follow his lifelong dream of owning a bookshop in Paris. Soon after, he receives an invitation to a secret society of survivors where he encounters other ticket holders who didn't board the ship. Haunted by their good fortune, they decide to form a book society to grapple with their own anxieties through heated discussions of The Awakening or The Picture of Dorian Gray. And yes, he is named Yorick like Hamlet. That is deliberate. They address that in the first chapter. I have a bad habit of reading the first chapter of books I acquire and then putting them down. So yes, it is Hamlet. That is deliberate. Yeah. Then we have The Material by Camille Bordas, which I genuinely think sounds like so fun and funky. Can comedy be taught? Someone at some point seemed to think so. The Chicago Stand-Up MFA program has enrolled young comedians for nearly a decade. Its teachers and students all know how bits work. In theory, at least. They know there's a line between sharp and cruel, that sad becomes funny at the right angle, that the worst is the best, the truth is the worst, and any moment of your life that isn't a punchline will either get you to a punchline or force you to be one. They're all afraid to be one. It's an ensemble cast, I believe. It's like super short, but I just know this is going to be one of those books where, like, you're laughing, and then 5 seconds later you're crying, kind of like Trevor Noah's autobiography was kind of like that for me. Like, I would laugh and then cry, laugh and then cry. I feel like this book is going to be like that. So I'm really excited to read it, honestly. It sounds really good, and it also sounds kind of emotional. Love that. Next we have another series. So this was to promote this book, which is coming out soon. Actually, it may already be out. It came out in June 4th. It's out. So that is already released. But it is the third book in the Marlowe Murder Club mystery series, which I'm a huge mystery fan. So the fact that they had all 3 books available for us to take, I was like, well, I haven't read them yet, but I've been wanting to. This book had been on my TBR for ages. So I was like, I'll just take all 3. Why not? So the basic description is, to solve an impossible murder, you need an impossible hero. Judith Potts is 77 years old and blissfully happy. She lives on her own in a faded mansion just outside Marlowe. There's no man in her life to tell her what to do or how much whiskey to drink, and to keep herself busy, she sets crosswords for the national newspapers. One evening, while out swimming in the Thames, Judith witnesses a brutal murder. The local police don't believe her story, so she decides to investigate for herself and is soon joined in her quest by Susie, a salt-of-the-earth dog walker, and Bex, the prim and proper wife of the local vicar. Together, they are the Marlowe Murder Club. When another body turns up, they realize they have a real-life serial killer on their hands, and the puzzle they set out to solve has become a trap from which they might never escape. I just love the idea of people that are, like, on the older side of life, like, getting to dive in to new adventures. I just love that. Because as someone who has this, like, massive fear of not doing enough with my life, it gives me this hope that I always have time. So there's that. And yeah, I'm obviously not going to read the premise for book 2 and 3 because I don't want it to spoil anything for the first book. But yeah, I feel like it's going to be one of those things where I really fall in love with the characters and really enjoy it. This book, very controversial. I've heard very mixed reviews on this author. I feel like I've heard very controversial things about this author. Not as a person, but just, like, about their books. I feel like you either love the books or hate them. I am not a huge fan of dark romance. A lot of the people I have heard say love her books are really into dark romance. So this is going to be kind of my dive straight in, no intro kind of thing. And if I hate it, I decide her books aren't for me. But if I like it, maybe I go back to the beginning, read all of her books. We'll see. I do actually have more YA books. I totally lied. Once a Queen by Sarah Adler. When 14-year-old American Eva Joyce unexpectedly finds herself spending the summer at the mysterious manor house of the English grandmother she's never met, she soon discovers that her family, the manor staff, and even the house itself are hiding secrets. I am really excited to read this one. It sounds like exactly what I would have loved to experience at 14. But obviously I'm not going to experience. Apparently there's some magical elements to it. I just am really, really excited to dive into this one. I think it's going to be really great. And then we have The God in the Gummo by Sophie Kim. In this sly and dazzling contemporary fantasy, the most notorious nine-tailed fox in Korea pairs up with a trickster god turned detective to track down a wrathful demon before it can destroy the mortal world. That just sounds to me like something I would eat up. Just devour. Book 1 of Fate's Thread, I don't know if it's duology, I don't know if it's trilogy, I don't know if there's more. I'm a huge fantasy fan, so this just sounds super fun. I actually don't know if this is YA or not. Is it? Let's find out. I'm not seeing an age recommendation, so I'm gonna go no. But I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. That is not... Yeah, I'm not gonna call that. Don't know. Before my books topple over, I'm gonna straighten that stack. And then my last YA book is Displeasure Island, which is a sequel. I have not read the original. I want to go back and read the original, but basically this girl's best friend dies, but she can see ghosts, and they are, like, solving mysteries together, and this is kind of based on And Then There Were None, by Agatha Christie. If you've ever read that book, it's kind of like an and then there were none situation where people start dying bit by bit. And because the main character can see ghosts, obviously she tries to use that to her advantage in the solving, which is going to be super fun. Really excited to read that one, honestly. Then we have another series. I've already read the first book in this series, but The Corpse in the Closet and The Blast from the Past, which are the sequel and third book in the series of The Dead Guy Next Door by Lucy Score. I have not read whatever, I'm totally blanking on the title, the most famous book that Lucy Score wrote, that series. I know it's called the Knock 'Em Out series. Could not tell you an individual title. Haven't read those. Those were really controversial. I was given the opportunity to read The Dead Guy Next Door on NetGalley, and I really enjoyed it. So I was like, you know what? Like, why, if they're offering me the second and third book at this event, why would I not take them? And they were both finished copies, which is extra special. But yeah, like, I really, really love Dead Guy Next Door. Basically, the premise is that Riley Thorne is a psychic, and she has this vision of her neighbor dying repeatedly. And then she goes to the cops about it, and she's like, he's going to die. Like, I don't know why, I don't know how, but someone is going to kill him. Here's a description of the person who's going to kill him. And obviously the cops think this is suspicious because she's, like, not telling them she's a psychic, and also that's not real evidence. So when he is murdered by someone that matches that description, obviously they're like, what the fuck? And they look after her, and they're basically trying to, like, one of the cops is really nice, and he's like, I don't think you did it, but also this is really suspicious and weird. And then this PI is hired by someone who's related to the person who's killed. And the PI also doesn't trust the psychic. But they are kind of thrown together again and again because he doesn't like the cops that are investigating her, because he used to be a cop and he used to work with them. And the tension kind of builds, and this is the second and third book in that series. It's fun. They're funky little mysteries. Obviously, main character's a psychic, PI. They end up together at the end of the first book. That's not a spoiler. It's a romance. Like, you should expect that. But yeah, the second and third book just sound really interesting. Like, even just the titles. The Corpse in the Closet. Hello. Yes, I want to read that. So I'm very excited to get to these eventually. But, like, also, I haven't had time. Which kind of sucks. But that's how life goes sometimes. And then more of these books that I got from this event. But these are all... Actually, this is the last book that I got from that event, and it is The Mesmerist by Caroline Woods, and the description is not on the back, it's on the inside. A tightly plotted page-turner ripped from the headlines of history as three very different women must work together to stop a killer and save the truest home they've ever known. And this is also taking place, like, when spiritualism and mesmerists are becoming a thing. Before hypnotism, like, existed. Before... It takes place when? 1894, Minneapolis, which is a very interesting location. So it's somebody who lives at a home of unwed mothers, a Quaker, and someone who wants to leave said home of unwed mothers. So these three women's lives are just really intertwined. It's a very vague description, but it sounds really good. All the same. And I just, like, can't wait to learn more about those characters. So there's that. And now we are moving in to a category that is by far the cause of most of the books that I have, and that is the back room at my job. And I've taken so many books from that room. So we're just gonna go through all the advanced reader copies that I have taken, because I was allowed to, which is a lot. Note for my managers, if you see this, I did not take all of these at once. I swear, this is something I've been building up since last summer. I had a few of them then. Yeah, and also some of these books are long released and were sitting in the break room years after they released, so I don't want to hear a complaint. So, The Scenic Route, romance. Felicity Pax loves her job. She craves excitement, and being a bounty hunter gives her that in spades. So when her estranged mother disappears with a small fortune in tow, Felicity chases her like she would any other skip. Too bad she didn't barter on having increasingly infuriating and infuriatingly hot P.I. Bennett Green on her tail. Obviously fun little rom-com. There is nothing else to say about that. It is a fun little rom-com. Fun, funky, fresh. By Source Books. So, and that comes out in July. Ooh, very exciting. I might honestly take that with me on a trip in July and read it the month that it comes out. That would be fun. This also comes out in July. Also Source Books. It's called A Perfect Story by Elizabeth Benavent, who is an internationally best-selling author. That's really cool. I haven't read anything she's written yet. This one comes out very end of July, actually 3 days after I leave on my trip, so perfect. Margot has to be perfect for everyone, but for David, she just has to be herself. Margot Ortega has everything she could possibly want. Successful career, gorgeous apartment, handsome fiancé. So why isn't she happy? After years of playing princess to maintain her family's impossible standards, it only takes one nervous breakdown for Margot's grand wedding and fairy tale facade to come crashing to the ground. David Sanchez may not be from Margot's wealthy, high society world, but he recognizes the sadness in her eyes the minute she sits across from him at the bar. As Margot spills her story to him, the handsome bartender proposes a fake dating solution that could send both their lovers running back to them. Obviously, if it's fake dating, I'm gonna jump at that. This is a 600-page book. That's kind of bonkers. But fake dating. So, there's that. The next one comes out September of this year. The Serial Killer's Guide to San Francisco. This is a mystery, if you couldn't guess by the title. Ooh. Welcome to San Francisco, a city with killer charm. Capri Sanzio has been interested in the topic of serial killers since she was a kid and discovered that she was the granddaughter of serial killer William Overkill Bill Sanzio. These days, Capri makes her living giving serial killer tours of the city. She's always believed in her grandfather's innocence, though she's never fully leaped into the details of the case. But now, an Overkill Bill copycat has struck in San Francisco, and Capri's former mother-in-law, Sylvia, just cut off Capri's daughter's tuition payments. Needing cash, and with the case back in the news, Capri wonders if this is the time to exonerate her grandfather. She could finally uncover the truth about Overkill Bill, documenting the process with a podcast and a book, and hopefully earn some real money. I literally picked up because I was like, this sounds like it's going to be fun and goofy while also being a mystery. Which, like, look at the cover. Tell me that does not say goofy and fun. You really can't. It literally is pitched on the back as Only Murders in the Building meets Vertigo meets Gilmore Girls. That to me is like very goofy, silly, fun, solving a mystery, cozy mystery vibes. So I'm very excited about this one, and I have been to San Francisco, so it's going to be really cool to be able to actually picture the places that, the setting of this book. Super fun, super funky, fresh. I have a whole new stack of these, so do not think we're done of books I've taken from the break room. One Last Word by Suzanne Park. Sarah Che is the founder of the app One Last Word, which allows you to send a message to whoever you want after you pass. Safeguards are in place, so the app will only send out when you're definitely, absolutely, 100% dead. But when another Sarah Che dies, and the obituary triggers the prototype to auto-send messages that Sarah uploads on one drunken night to her emotionally charged mother, to a former best friend who ghosted her, and to her unrequited high school crush, Harry, she has to deal with all the havoc that ensues and reopen old wounds from the past. This is also, I believe, a romance. Yeah, it's Avon. Fiction. I believe it's a romance because it's Avon. But I could be mistaken. It's saying fiction. So maybe it's romance, maybe it's not. We'll find out. The Mystery Writer, which came out in March. Oh, I forgot to say one last word came out in April. This came out in March. It is about this person who, like, is a lawyer, and is, like, working on this book. So she quits her job as a lawyer. She, like, stops going, and shows up at her brother's house, and she's, like, kind of waiting to see if he actually will let her stay, but then she finds out that her mentor, who's a super successful author, has been murdered, and so she has to, like, find the killer and allow justice to be served. So she kind of has to dip back into the fact that she's, like, trained as an attorney, and also, like, solve the mystery while also, like, working on the like, book, and then also the brother has to, like, get involved somehow. I'm just very interested to see, like, it's a very confusing premise, but I feel like once I actually start reading it, it'll be really cool. It kind of makes me think of, like, that one Stephen King novel where the author gets kidnapped. You know what I'm talking about? But also not that at all. Who knows? I make weird associations in my brain. This book I took, like, a month ago from work, but it came out in January, so no complaints. But it's called The Gilded Crown by Marianne Gordon. And it's about this girl who can raise the dead. Which is, like, really cool, but then the queen summons her and is like, you have to save these specific people. Bring them back from the dead. And she has to, like, trade a part of herself to bring people back from the dead. So it's, like, this whole, like, will she, won't she, like, is she capable kind of thing. And obviously, like, to keep things in balance, death will do what it wants. So I'm very excited to read this. I actually was lucky enough to attend Harper Voyager and Avon's, like, upcoming release thing, and this had already come out at the time, but they did talk about it, so I really wanted to read it. So the fact that I was able to get an ARC is really, really cool. I don't know if this is a different country's cover, because on Goodreads it's showing a completely different cover than what I have, so we shall see, but I'm very excited about this one as well. Like, if you've read Realm Breaker by Victoria Aveyard, just the description of this main character reminds me a lot of, like, Sarasa. So I'm very, very excited to read this, but it's also pitched as, like, The Witch's Heart meets Priory of the Orange Tree, so who knows? Certainly not I. Then we have a book, I do not know if this is the same author or not, but written by Emily H. Wilson. Is this the same Emily Wilson who translated the Iliad and the Odyssey? I do not know. There's probably a way I can check. Haven't found it yet. This came out in January of 2023, so it is long out. I found this last summer in the break room, and I just, like, it sounds really cool. It's a fantasy, and it's, like, I don't know how to describe it without just reading the back to you, so I'm going to do that. Inanna is an impossibility, the first full Anunnaki born on Earth in ancient Mesopotamia. Crowned the goddess of love, she is destined for greatness. But Inanna is born into a time of war. The 12 immortal Anunnaki who are worshipped across Sumer have split into warring factions, threatening to tear the world apart. Forced into a marriage to negotiate a peace, she soon realizes she has been placed in terrible danger. Gilgamesh, a mortal human son of the Anunnaki and notorious womanizer, finds himself captured and imprisoned. His captor, King Akka, seems to distance himself and his people from the gods. Arrogant and selfish, Gilgamesh is given one final chance to prove himself. Ninshabar, I'm totally butchering that, so sorry. A powerful warrior woman is cast out of her tribe after an act of kindness. Hunted by her own people, she escapes across the country, searching for acceptance and a new place in the world. As their journeys push them closer together and their fates intertwine, they come to realize that together they may have the power to change the face of the world forever. This is the first book in a trilogy. Supposedly, there's a preview of book 2 in here. It sounds just really cool to me, and that could just be because I was obsessed with ancient Mesopotamia for a time in middle school. But to add fantasy to that is really, really fun. So yeah, I'm really excited to read this one. Next, we have The Undetectables. A magical serial killer is stalking the occult town of Racton. Hypnotic whistling causes victims to chew their own tongues off, leading to the killer being dubbed the Whistler. Original, right? So it's a detective agency run by 3 witches and a ghost in a cat costume who's really bitter about the fact that he died while wearing a cat costume. And the literal the literal tagline for this book is be gay, solve crimes, take naps. So like, how could I not pick that up? You know, I have a friend who's really gonna love this after I read it. I have a feeling. But we'll see. Also, I picked this up because to me it sounded like a grown-up version of Lockwood & Co., which if you've seen or read Lockwood & Co., holy crap, that series is like my holy grail. I'm obsessed with it. I love it. I think it can do no wrong. So to see anything that's even vaguely similar, I'm a fan. Next, we have Shadows of the Lost, which came out in June of 2023. As a member of the Charmers Council, Gage is able to form lasting bonds with the magical beasts of the world. At least, he used to be a charmer until he died and was brought back as one of the immortal assassins of Kor. Now he's far more dangerous, and something beyond the shadows lies in wait, hungry to claim him for its own. As leader of the assassins, all Cost can do is watch as Gage struggles with his new life day by day. He wants nothing more than to ease Gage's suffering, yet how can he when they both know he's the one responsible? There's nothing left but bitter memories and hopeless longing between them, yet when Gage is lost to the Shadow Realm, Cost is the only one with any chance of bringing him back, if they can learn to trust and perhaps love each other again. So obviously romantasy. Tagline, not even death could keep them apart. I'm really excited to read this one too. I've heard no one talk about it. I have not heard about this book at all. Not a single thing. The reviews are they're not bad, but there aren't a lot of them, so I don't actually know how reliable they are. But I would love to hear if you have read this book or if you've heard about this book, what you've heard, because I've heard nothing. So please share. Then we have Summer Fridays by Suzanne Rindle. You've got mail for a new generation set in the days of AOL and instant messenger banter about a freshly engaged editorial assistant who winds up spending her summer Fridays with the person she least expects. This takes place in New York in 1999, so pre-9/11, obviously, which I'm a little interested to hear about because obviously, like, 9/11 changed the scope of the entire country, the entire world, genuinely, but especially New York. So I'm kind of excited to see, like, what New York was like before that, because I lived in Manhattan when I was little, but I was born post 9/11, 2 years post 9/11. Like, there is no, I did not overlap with pre-9/11 New York. But I will be kind of interested to see how different it is from the New York I remember, even though I was a toddler, and like the New York my parents remember, and that kind of thing. I'm just really, really excited, really interested. And also it's a fun little rom-com that takes place in New York in the summer. How could I not love it? And it's You've Got Mail, essentially. Which I loved the retelling of Harry Met Sally You Again. That was really big all over social media. I really liked that book. That was my book of the month pick for, I want to say August last year. But I really enjoyed it. So, and then a book coming out in August of this year, The Doll Makers, by Lynn Buchanan, where, I don't even know how to describe this book. I'm just going to read the little blurb. In this dark and enchanting standalone fantasy from debut author Lynn Buchanan, discover a world centered around destructive, all-consuming monsters, the magical dolls designed to fight this force, and the artisans tasked with creating demon-slaying dolls. a touch cozy fantasy, and a touch horror, The Dollmakers is perfect for fans of Studio Ghibli films and the works of T.J. Klune and Travis Baldree and readers of Juniper and Thorn and The Goblin Emperor. I love T.J. Klune. That may be a controversial opinion. The only book of his that I've read is The House in the Cerulean Sea. I actually currently from the library have In the Lives of Puppets by T.J. Klune because it's literally a Pinocchio retelling, and how could I not take that? But it sounds really, really good. And this was another book that I was lucky enough to attend the Harper Voyager conference about upcoming releases for this past spring. And the way the author pitched it and the way it was talked about by the people who led the conference, just genuinely, I was like, I have to read this book. And when I saw that we had it in the break room, I just like immediately knew I had to take it. Yeah, I'm just really, really excited to read this one. I'm also excited to see how they blend cozy fantasy and horror, because those are two very different genres. So I'm excited to see how they are going to blend those into one book. We shall see. But that brings us to Spin of Fate, which is pitched as an Ember in the Ashes meets Avatar: The Last Airbender in this propulsive, not-to-be-missed high fantasy debut inspired by Indian philosophy, which this one I believe is already out. It came out in May. But it just sounds really, really good. And I had to take it from the break room at work, mostly because of the cover. Let's look at that. But also, like, there's a map, a really cool map, and it's just genuinely, like, a really, really neat book. So I obviously had to read that. Definitely can't wait. And then we have Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan, which, if you're a huge fan of hers, she wrote Same Time Next Summer and Nora Goes Off Script. I've really wanted to read Nora Goes Off Script. I just haven't had a chance to get a copy yet. And this, genuinely, like, I saw it in the break room and nobody else had taken it, and I was like, I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna read it. So if you're a huge Annabelle Monaghan fan, let me know. This came out June 4th. So it is available to the public for reading purposes. But yeah, I would love to hear what other people think of her books, what other people think of this book in particular, because it's not something I've heard a lot about on social media. It's just kind of something like I've seen her books around in stores and thought they sounded good. So that's kind of that one. And then we have Saints of Storm and Sorrow, which is basically this, like, I love the way it's blurbed inside the book, so I'm just gonna give you that. In this fiercely imaginative, Filipino-inspired fantasy, a bisexual nun hiding a goddess-given gift is unwillingly transformed into a lightning rod for her people's struggle against colonialism. That's just incredible. Like, how can you ignore that? So obviously, I just absolutely had to get that. I'm so, so excited to dive into that one. But again, like, I'm excited about all these books. Can't talk enough about them. Forgot a middle grade book I've gotten here. This actually was from the event, not from the break room. Whoops. But it is like an escape room mystery type thing. I'm just going to read you the back because it reminds me combined of, like, if you ever read that 48 Room series with the kids with the tiny keys that went to the model houses, and then they, like, in the museum that were on display, and when they used the tiny keys, they turned tiny, but there were, like, adventures and things they had to do and solve inside these 48 rooms. I don't know. It's just, like, that's what it makes me think of, and also, like, combined with Monster House, if you ever watched that as a kid. 12-year-old Sarah Green wants nothing more than to spend 7th grade beating the hardest escape rooms alongside her best friend, Weston Hannah. But when a foreclosure notice shows up on Sarah's front door, everything changes. Now, her family will have to move away until they can get back on their feet. There's one way to get the money she needs: play the Delta game. According to local legend, 3 identical brothers dreamt of building the most epic funhouse in existence. They wanted the experience to be more than mirror mazes and optical illusions, so they not only created elaborate riddles and secret passages, but they also claimed to have hidden a treasure inside the building, a prize for beating their game. The three friends decide to take on the challenge, but once inside, they realize the house is unlike any escape room they've attempted. There are challenges, yes, but they feel personal. It seems impossible, but so does everything about the house. As the trio climbs through trapdoors, swings from wall to wall on ropes, and searches for hidden keys, Sarah worries if they are in way over their heads. But there's no turning back now, even if they wanted to. I think middle grade is underrated, personally. I still read middle grade all the time. Love it. So, I'm excited to read this one. But it may not be everybody's thing. Throwing that out there. And then we have The Phoenix Keeper, which I just have to share this little, letter inside the front from the author, where it has the little, animals from the fictional zoo. Set in a magical zoo teeming with mythical beasts, The Phoenix Keeper is a fierce joy of a cozy fantasy novel with a soul-restoring queer romance at its heart from one of the most exciting debut authors of the year. So I'm obsessed with this, just from that pitch, and I am so excited to read this one. Yay! And that is the last of arcs I took from the break room. So now it's time to move into books I purchased on my own and books that were given to me by a friend. And books I purchased on my own, I mean since I did those other purchase hauls. So we have The Summer Girl by Elle Kennedy, which was a bargain book at my place of work. It was $3, maybe. And why was I going to turn down a $3 fun rom-com? I'm going to be so completely honest. The main reason I got this book is because the male main character is a sailing instructor, and I love sailing. So I was interested in reading about a character who also sails. And that's pretty much where we're at. And then we have Turn Right at Machu Picchu, which is nonfiction, and it's a, story about the guy who discovered Machu Picchu, because the guy who wrote this book, retraced his steps and kind of recreated the story in a more accurate way without the bias of, what the original journey looked like and what Peru was like back then. So I think that's going to be really, really cool to read. I'm really excited to read it. I've never been to Peru, but I'm interested in hearing about it and hearing about Machu Picchu and hearing about its discovery and all that fun stuff. So I'm really excited about that one. It won all kinds of awards. I just hadn't really heard of it, but I get most of my book recommendations from the internet. So that could be why. And then we move into some amazing, amazing books that I got from a friend of mine. So we start with The Carnival of Curiosities, which says, in Victorian London, where traveling sideshows are the very pinnacle of entertainment, there is no more coveted ticket than Ash and Pretorius's Carnival of Curiosities. Each performance is a limited engagement, and London's elite bravely dare the dangerous seats of Southwark to witness the carnival's astounding assemblage of marvels. For a select few, however, the real show begins behind the curtain. Rumors abound that the show's proprietor, Aurelius Ashe, is more than an average magician. It's said that for the right price, he can make any wish come true. No one knows the truth of this claim better than Lucian the Lucifer, the carnival's star attraction. Born with the ability to create fire, he's dazzled spectators since he was a boy. When Odilion Rose, one of the most notorious men in London, comes calling with a proposition regarding the life of his young and beautiful charge, Charlotte, Ashe is tempted to refuse. But after Rose reveals a secret that threatens the security of the troupe's most vulnerable members, Ashe has no choice but to sign an insidious contract. The stakes grow higher as Lucian finds himself drawn to Charlotte and her to him, an attraction that spurs a dangerous course of events. Which to me sounds super interesting and super cool, so I'm really excited about that one. And then I have heard so much about this book. Genuinely so much. I don't know a thing about what it's about. I know it's a mystery where these three girls disappear as children. They have no memory of where they disappeared to. It changes their physical appearance, and then years and years and years later, the youngest is about to graduate high school, and the oldest sister disappears, and they have to find her. So I am very interested because I've heard so much about this book, so I feel like it has to be good because nothing I've heard has been negative, but at the same time, I'm worried it's overhyped, but also I don't know anything about it. So I don't know what to expect going into it, which might be a positive, but like, who really knows? And then this block of text, it's 4 books, well, 3 books and a novella, a whole trilogy. So I'm going to break this up for sure. Read 1 book, take a break. Read book 2, take a break. Read book 3, take a break. Because I cannot read this all in one sitting. It's 1,500 pages. That would be insane of me. But the pitch for the whole series is gods and mortals, power and love, death and revenge, she will unleash them all. Which sounds really cool. And I do really want to read it. It's just a brick that is bigger than my head. And then we have the most special gift that this same friend gave me, which is the Fairy Loot edition of Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare. It's so pretty. It's so gorgeous. Like, look at the sprayed edges. Like, I have to show you inside the dust jacket. Like, oh my god. I mean, oh my god. And like, lastly, oh my god. And, oh my god. Like, this can't be overrated. It's gorgeous. I'm so excited to read it. Mostly because it's gorgeous, but like also because it's supposed to be really good. And the pitch for that one is one was raised to rule, one was trained to die, welcome to the Chronicles of Castellan, which sounds really, really cool. So I'm down for that. And then the last 3 books that I have were gifted to me. The first was gifted to me by an author who I'm a huge fan of and know personally, which is extra cool. And I helped do a little bit of the research that went into this book, which makes it like extra special to my heart. I've already started reading it. But like, again, I'm just kind of chaos right now when it comes to what I'm reading and what I'm not. So I have started it. I'm really excited to read through the whole thing. I think I'm really going to enjoy it. Because I've enjoyed her other books in the past, and it's like one of those split timelines where basically there's like now where this girl goes back with her grandmother who fled Ireland because of World War II, and they go back to her house and they find all these old letters that she wrote during World War II and that she received during World War II, and kind of put together all the memories she's forgotten, which I think is going to be really, really neat, and I'm excited to read. And then we have 2 more. This one was sent to me by HarperCollins, which I'm so grateful for. And basically it's based on the caste system in India, but the people at the lowest level of the caste system are those who can control these things called spice gates, which connect all of the kingdoms, but only the people who can like control the spice gates can actually go through them. So like the whole of society rests on these people that are in like what is supposedly the lowest caste, but they also have magic powers. So I'm excited to read about like how that works, but I'm really excited to read it. It sounds like a really unique fantasy, and the author is a debut writer, which makes it like extra special, because I feel like a lot of times with debuts you don't get as unique of a premise, or it's like so unique that it's not quite compelling enough because it's not like based in something that makes sense. This I feel like it has a lot of potential, and I'm really excited to read it. And that comes out in July, I believe. And then lastly, we have A Fire in the Sky by Sophie Jordan, also sent to me by HarperCollins. They sent it in a little package with a dragon sticker on it, and then they sent me a little bath bomb themed for the book. I'm obsessed with this book. I don't know if you can see that, but it's like a flip book. How cool is that? And it's just, like, I'm so excited. In this brand new epic adult romantasy series, New York Times bestselling author Sophie Jordan returns to the sweeping high-stakes world of dragons, romance, and drama, first evoked in her best-selling young adult series, Firelight. Dragons are extinct, witches are outcast, magic is dying, but human lust for power is immortal. This is gonna be so good. It's coming out in September. It's gonna have sprayed edges, if that is something you're excited about. And I just think it's so creative that there's this little flip book. I'm so excited to read it. The characters seem great. It genuinely seems like it is going to be an absolutely incredible book. So I'm really excited for it. And yeah, I'm not going to take you through my library books, really. I'm just going to kind of go over them. I'm currently reading Blade Breaker. I also have Fate Breaker from the library. I also have Such Sharp Teeth, which is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. Sounds great. I have No Judgments by Meg Cabot because I loved the Princess Diaries series. Didn't know she wrote adult rom-coms. Found that. Took it. I have With Love from Cold World by Alicia Thompson because I read her first book, her debut book, Love in the Time of Serial Killers, and really enjoyed it. And then lastly, like I mentioned earlier, I have TJ Klune's In the Lives of Puppets, which is basically a Pinocchio retelling from what I gather. So yeah, if you made it this far, thank you, because this is over an hour of content. So thank you for following along and listening to me yap for that long. But yeah, I hope you'll come back and subscribe below.